In this video, we will be looking at some of the most dangerous serial killers in Africa. Out of over 100 lists of known serial killers, I have been able to compile the list of the top 10 most dangerous serial killers to come out of Africa. Number 10. Masten Wanjala, also known as the bloodthirsty vampire, Kenya. Currently the youngest known serial killer in Africa, all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. It was said that Wanjala started his killing spree at just the age of 15. He targeted little boys in football fields around his community, in specific neighborhoods in Nairobi. He would pretend to be a coach and then lure his victims to secluded areas where he would drug them by forcing them to drink a substance or simply spray those substances in their face. It is unclear what happened next after his victims become drowsy from the substances, but it was said that he would cut out their veins and drink their blood. That is, for some of his victims. Those victims whose blood he didn't drink, he would hold them hostage and call their family for ransom. And that may have been how he might have been caught. After he killed his victims, he would throw their bodies into a sewer or a dense bush and move on in the hunt for his next victim. It is unclear how he was caught, but he might have been a suspect, as many of the kids who go missing were believed to have been seen with him around the time they went missing, and so when they arrested him, he confessed to killing them and sucking their blood in some cases before disposing of their bodies. It was said that Wanjala may have killed a total of 10 children, all between the ages of 8 to 13. In July of 2021, he was arrested and kept in prison awaiting charges. Surprisingly, a few days later, after he had been arrested, he escaped from prison. Although many people believe that he may have been helped by one of the guards in the prison cell, the police, however, claimed that he escaped during a power shortage in the station. It was the following morning during a roll call that they noticed that he had escaped. Instantly, the Kenyan authorities put it out on the news that Wanjala had escaped from prison and that the people should be on the lookout. And that was how the community knew that the killer was at large again. Everyone in the community was alert. Parents began escorting their children to school and back. At the same time, the police were under strong criticism from the public, wondering how would they let such a killer escape from their custody. Even though they claimed that he left during the power shortage, was he the only one in the custody? Was he the only one in the cell? Why was he the only one able to escape from custody? These are the questions that made a lot of people believe that Wanjala might have been helped specifically by one or two policemen present in his escape. It is unclear how Wanjala was found for the second time, but some sources claim that he had gone to hang out at a football field again like he usually does. Only this time he was recognized by the little children who raised alarm. Wanjala took to his heels and ran to his mother's house, where he was traced to, dragged out of the house, beaten by a mob of angry youths. He was beaten heavily with sticks and stones till he passed. The sad thing about Wanjala's death is not the fact that he actually died, but it was the fact that he died with so much information as to how he lured his victims, if there was any second person involved, and what he did and why he sucked the blood of his victims. There were so many things unsaid as to his method of killing and his choice of killing and how he handled his victims. Unfortunately, he didn't live to give the information that would have been vital in understanding how he, as a serial killer, operated. Number 9. The Mailoni brothers, Zambia. The Mailoni brothers were a gang of serial killers and suspected separatists made up of 3 brothers, Micah, Stephanie and Fabian. Although known to have only killed 12 people between April of 2007 to June of 2013, record has it that they may have displaced over 200 residents in the Luano Valley of Mkuchi Central Province, Zambia. It is unclear how they chose their target, but according to expert researchers, they believe the motive behind the terror of the notorious brothers was to rule over Luano Valley and be feared by many. So it is possible that most of their victims might have been people who stood to oppose them or people they saw as threats to their reign in Luano Valley. It was said that they controlled and bullied residents of Luano Valley during their reign. Their major weapons were bow and arrow, which made a lot of Zambians believe that the brothers must have used charms to keep escaping the police. I mean, the police had guns, these people had bow and arrow. They were basically the primitive form of serial killers. So how did they keep escaping the police for a whole 7 years? How? The brothers had been on the police wanted list for over 7 years, and within those 7 years, they continued terrorizing Luano and killing anyone who got in their way, and somehow they kept managing to escape the police. However, this is how they were killed. According to a source, it was said on June of 2013, 3 men asked a security personnel, Corporal Chapela, to escort them to a river to get raw materials, since they were all afraid to go alone, and so Chapela and the guys walked through a bush path, and just when they got to the shores of the swamp, they saw fresh footprints. Realizing someone else was around, they took into hiding, when upon they spotted a camp with smoke coming out of it. In their hiding, they saw 2 people come out of the camp. It was at this point that the 3 villagers told Chapela that those were the Mailoni brothers that the police had been looking for 7 years. Chapela needed to be sure, and so he asked them again, and they confirmed. Chapela moved closer to the camp and opened fire, killing 2 of the brothers instantly, and later he shot the last one, Micah, who, before he died, said to the villagers that they had sold them out. Their bodies were taken to the police station where their mother, Miss Janet Ngimu, was called to identify her children. Ironically, Miss Janet was happy to identify the bodies of her children to the public and to the police. She herself was also scared of them and at the point had to run for her life. But hearing that they had been killed, she along with her eldest son both came out of hiding finally to identify them for the police. Janet apologized to those who had been affected by the terror of her children and asked not to be judged by their actions. According to her, she was like, how was I supposed to know that the people I carried in my wombs were going to be serial killers? This woman was terrorized by them also. She was scared, she was bullied. I mean, imagine living in a house where your children are serial killers. The eldest brother of this trio had to run away, and when their mother Janet got the chance to escape the community, she took it and ran away. In 2013, Corporal Chapela was awarded for killing the Mailoni brothers, and the 3 villagers who helped identify them were given cash prizes. Miss Janet was also gifted a house. Number 8. David Gracious West, Nigeria. David Gracious West is a convicted Nigerian serial killer whose killing spree lasted only 3 months, according to records. One would think just because he had such a short killing span, his victims would at least be minimal. Unfortunately, David may have killed well over 15 young women between these times, with at least 1 victim a week and 5 a month. But personally, there is a high chance that this man might have killed over 15 people. His victims were mostly vulnerable young women regardless of age, and his method of killing was rather specific and consistent with each victim. Between the city of Lagos, Owerri and Port Harcourt, and contrary to popular claim that he met his victims online, Gracious mostly approached these young women in person, bars, clubs, and public transports. He would offer to pay for whatever they may want, and furthermore offer to give them a reasonable amount of money if they spent the night with him. And when the victims agree, he would take them to a hotel, sleep with them, and somewhere in the middle of the night as they are asleep, he would wake up with the volume of the television increased to the highest. He would then hold a knife to the throat of these women, waking them up and threatening to kill them if they should make a noise. But this is where things get very tricky with Gracious. You see, Gracious was just a plain serial killer. He derived so much pleasure from snuffing the life out of these women, and so he needed a way to do it without making a mess. He didn't want to stab, if not there'll be blood everywhere and all over his shirt, and he didn't want to struggle or make them fight him back or something like that. Because whenever his victims were found in the hotel, it was almost pure and clean. And it begs the question as to how did he end up tying his victims' legs and hand and gagging them to the point that they were unable to scream. I mean, this is a hotel. Even if the television was on loud, these victims could have at least fought back to an extent. But the hotel was usually arranged, the hotel was usually clean, the bed were usually dressed, and the victims were basically lying down in a sleeping position without any sign of struggle. It was puzzling as to how he killed his victims so clean, but eventually when he was caught, he gave a vivid explanation as to how he was able to pull that off. The thing is, he knew he was going to kill the woman anyway. but he needed to do it in a way where it would be pure, where they won't have to struggle or fight back, and where he won't need to make a mess. And so his trick was to convince these women that he would not hurt them if they cooperate, which would make them assume that he wanted money or maybe wanted to have his way with them again forcefully. And so after the women have been assured of their safety in exchange for their cooperation, he would cut pieces of clothes from the pillowcase and tie them up, hands and legs and mouths. In most of all the cases, these victims gave him helping hands in cutting of this pillowcase and even presenting their hands and legs for to tie. I mean, they were so comfortable to the point that they felt that yes, maybe they will be safe. They have to even help him hold the pillowcase while he cuts it up to the point of making it a rope. And sometimes they would have to present their hands themselves and their legs. This is how comfortable he made the women, because they were so sure that if they just submit to tying their hands and legs and mouths, he would just take whatever he wants and leave. However, after these women have been bound hands, legs and mouth, he would go ahead and strangle them to death. It was also said that he stole from them valuables, phones and money. Within 3 months, over 8 bodies of young women were reported to have been discovered in hotel rooms, all in similar bounded conditions. A manhunt for a serial killer was soon announced, and instantly David was caught after a CCTV footage of him began to spread around the internet. That is, after the killing of his last victim. With the help of social media, his Facebook page was soon identified, and in an attempt to flee the city of Port Harcourt, he was caught and arrested at a checkpoint. In October of 2020, he was found guilty of 9 of the 15 murders he was accused of and sentenced to death by hanging. Number 7. Charles Papa Kwabena Ebo Quansah, Ghana. Charles Quansah is a Ghanaian convicted serial killer, popularly dubbed as the Accra Strangler. His span of crime is recorded to be between 1993 to 2000, but unlike all the other serial killers on this list, Charles' road to justice was a little sketchy. During the 90s, Accra, Ghana was faced with a crisis. Residents across the city were waking up to dead bodies of young women who had been raped and strangled, dumped in bushes, stadiums, and just along the roadsides. It was becoming alarming, and the police were finding it difficult to find who the killer was. But they had a suspect, Charles Kwabena. They had their eye on Charles, who at the time was living in Accra and working as a mechanic. The reason they had their eye on Charles was because Charles had a criminal record of raping women in the 80s. He was jailed in 1986 for rape, and barely 3 months after his release, he was rearrested for rape again in 1987, and in 1996 he was arrested for robbery. With this record, the police had him in mind as who might be the person behind the daily dose of dead young women that the city of Accra was dealing with at the time. But they had no lead on him. They couldn't place him at the scene with any of the victims. That is, people who knew these dead women couldn't even say that they had seen them with Charles at the time of their death, which is sort of troubling to me, because I would think with the amount of women that have been found dead on the roadside at the time, somebody could have at least said, wait, I saw her with the man, wait, I saw her with this man. If 2-3 persons could identify one particular man that they had seen these victims with, I feel like the police could have easily gotten their suspect. That is, if it was Charles Kwabena. But with all these deaths and this amount of young women dying on the road, people couldn't even say who they saw them with last, which was troubling. I mean, it's not like the killer was a ghost. The list is these people would have at least seen these victims with 1 or 2 persons moments before they died. No one who knew these victims could say that they had seen them with Charles at any point. However, in the year 2000, the police would finally apprehend him after he was believed to have murdered his girlfriend, Joyce Boateng, almost in the same similar manner as all the other victims whose killer were yet to be identified. When Charles was in custody for the killing of his girlfriend, the police used the opportunity to charge him for the death of all 34 women who had been killed since 1993. It was later said that Charles confessed to killing only 9 of these women, and it was with these 9 women he was tried and convicted of. However, in 2005, while he was still in prison, Charles denied ever admitting to killing of these 9 women. He maintained his innocence, saying that the only person he is guilty of killing was his girlfriend, Joyce, and that these other women were just slapped on him and he was forced and bullied by the police into confessing to killing those women, that he never killed them. Funny enough, Charles' compelling accusation at the police might seem very plausible because at the time, with the rate at which young women were getting missing, the police were under serious pressure. In fact, the citizens of Accra was already threatening to recall the minister at the time. They were forcing him to resign and step down because he couldn't provide the killers of these young women. So it is safe to say that the police were under serious pressure to find the killers of these women, and since they couldn't, it is very possible that they used the opportunity to just put it on Charles Kwabena Quansah. And that was the argument Charles was coming with. He was saying that he didn't kill these women. After all, Nobody has come out to say that they had seen him in the same proximity as any of these victims who had died in the past. So, on what grounds were the police using to charge him with the murder of these women who have been killed all these years? Except for the fact that it was in a similar way that he might have killed his girlfriend, Joyce. Other than that, there wasn't any concrete evidence to link Charles directly to any of these victims who had been killed in the past. Ironically, it became almost clear that Charles might have been the Accra Strangler after all, because ever since he was arrested, the daily appearance of dead women in Accra stopped. This was what made many people believe that maybe he was the one after all. But let me know what you think. Do you think Charles Papa Kwabena Quansah was indeed the Accra Strangler, or do you think that there is a chance that the killer is still somewhere out there waiting to strike again? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Number 6. Elias Xitavudzi, South Africa. Elias was a South African serial killer whose killing spree began in 1953 and ended in 1959 in the township of Atteridgeville, a predominantly white neighborhood during apartheid regime. Whereas some sources claim that he killed both men and women, it is possible that majority of his victims were mostly white women whom he may have targeted in farmlands. Most likely, the male victims may have just been husbands of these women he killed who were present at the time of the murder. He was dubbed the Pangna Man, the man who used machete to kill. This was before he was caught. Residents of Atteridgeville would wake up to dead victims who had been hacked to death, and since it became a consistent thing, they figured a serial killer was out there lurking around, and so they tagged him the Pangna Man because of the way his victims were killed, being hacked to death with a machete. Whereas some sources claimed his motive was political as a result of the racism going on during this period of time, some other sources claimed he might have just done it in the bid to rob them, as he is believed to have raped his female victims and then steal their valuables from them. He was caught in the process of selling a wristwatch of one of his victims, and instantly he was arrested, tried and found guilty of murdering 16 people. He was immediately sentenced to death. Although many people blamed the quickness of his trial and death sentence to the fact that he was a black man killing white people, some people felt that he most likely deserved it. Number 5. Rosemary Ndlovu, South Africa. Rosemary might just be the recent most latest serial killer from South Africa on this list, who just concluded a trial for her role in the deaths of multiple family members of hers. Rosemary Ndlovu is said to be a South African former police officer who diligently took life insurance policies on selected members of her family and named herself as their beneficiary. In a surprising twist of events, these family members she took insurance on began to die one by one, and after they died, Rosemary would go on to claim their insurance money. Although Rosemary may have not directly killed any of her family members as believed, she hired assassins to do the job. It is still safe to include her in this dishonorable list of serial killers. However, many people believe she may have used her bare hands to kill her own sister, whom she had gone to visit one morning and had made a hot tea for her in which she poisoned it. It was said that after she had poisoned the tea, she left her sister only to come back later in the day hoping her sister had died, but to her surprise, her sister was still very much alive. It was said that Rosemary then pounced on her and strangled her with her bare hands. Part of the people Rosemary is believed to have killed were her sister, nephew, boyfriend, also father to her child, another nephew, and another niece. One of her nephews was said to have confronted her after learning that she had taken an insurance over his mother's death, that is, the one she had tried poisoning with a cup of tea. The next day after the confrontation, it was said that he was blanched to death by unknown assassins. Rosemary was caught during her last attempt to kill her sister, mother, her little nephews and nieces. She had hired a hitman who changed his mind after seeing Rosemary's frail mother. The assassin told her that he couldn't go on with it, and so Rosemary told him that if he doesn't do it, she would get another killer to do it. And this killer was fine with it. However, instead of this killer to go home and just relax, he went to the police to report Rosemary, telling the police that there is a lady who is looking for an assassin to wipe out her entire family, including her mother. It was at this point the police decided to play assassin for Rosemary. An undercover police officer pretended to be an assassin for Rosemary to hire. And just like that, Rosemary fell for it. The policeman hid a camera in the vehicle on their way to the apartment where he was supposed to do the killing. The camera captured Rosemary detailing to him how he would go about the killing, admitting to the fact that she had done this in the past. Rosemary was arrested and tried in court in 2021. She was found guilty of murder of over 7 of her family members. She received a life sentence in prison. Number 4. Raya and Sakina, Egypt. Raya and Sakina were 2 Egyptian sisters who, along with their husbands and 2 other accomplices, committed series of gruesome murders in Lebanon neighborhood of Alexandria, Upper Egypt between 1919 and 1920. During the First World War, Egypt was suffering an economic crisis which led to the husbands of these 2 sisters losing their cotton farm jobs. And so they moved to Upper Egypt where they opened a brothel. At this time, prostitution was illegal, but still they ran the brothel secretly and they were very successful to the point they opened another branch. However, after the war ended in 1918, Egypt was met with a revolution and the brothel business suffered, and so this group of people had to find another way to make money drastically. It was said that Raya and Sakina would go to the marketplace to befriend wealthy women, invite them to their brothel, give them alcohol till they are tipsy, and while these women were struggling with their drinks, the husbands would show up out of nowhere and hold these women down, eventually strangling them till they died. And then their money, jewelries and valuables would be taken away from them. The thing is, this was during a hard time in Egypt, so a lot of these wealthy women did not exactly keep their monies in the bank. They converted their wealth into jewelries, gold and other form of valuables which they would wear on their hands, necks as jewelries. And that was how Raya and Sakina were able to identify these women, befriend them, make jokes with them and just plainly invite them to their brothel where they would eventually meet their death. They also targeted male customers who would come to patronize them. They would kill them and take their money. Sometimes they also killed some of their sex workers in order to avoid paying them their cuts. And after they had killed their victims, they would break tiles on the floors of the house and bury them and then place the tiles back, putting the floor in its normal state. Then Raya and Sakina would sell the jewelries and share the money amongst all 6 of them. So this was how they were caught. Obviously, people began to notice that some people were getting missing. So many wealthy, notable women were just disappearing. And the funny thing is, these women at the time of them going missing were all spotted in the company of Raya and Sakina. So it was almost easy to spot where these women would have been. The only problem is, whenever Raya and Sakina were called in for questioning about the whereabouts of these women, they would deny, saying that yes, they had seen them, they came to their brothel, but they all left. And so since they were women, since Raya and Sakina were women, it was almost difficult to assume or see that the victims might have been killed by them. You see, back then women were seen as some kind of saints and angels who were incapable of doing such a thing. That was why it was very difficult for the police to pinpoint Raya and Sakina as the killers of these women, because they didn't see it happening. Supposedly these women were seen in the presence of men. Maybe it would have been easier or quicker for the police to catch the killers. So over time, clearly Raya and Sakina kept getting away with it, regardless of the fact that many of these women who go missing were last seen in their presence. However, on December 11th, 1920, a body was found by the side of the road, dismembered and unrecognized. That same period, a plumber who was called to fix pipes discovered skeletal remains of many women in what looked like a burial site in the building. The plumber was called to fix pipe in one of these brothel buildings that Raya and Sakina and her husbands and the other accomplices had used to carry out their crimes. And in the process of trying to dig the ground to see where the pipes were coming from, that was when he stumbled upon many skeletal remains of these women. And he immediately informed the police. And during the police investigation, they were drawn back to Raya and Sakina because these buildings where these bodies were found was the same building Raya and Sakina ran their brothel. It was also the same building these people were said to have been invited to by these two women at the time they went missing. Invariably, the police were back to Raya and Sakina, and immediately Raya and Sakina were arrested along with their husbands and the two other accomplices. Although history has it that Raya and Sakina only did the luring while the men did the killing, some argue that the real serial killers are the men and not Raya and Sakina. That the only reason Raya and Sakina are put in the cover front of this story is because they were women and basically the first group of women to be sentenced to death after they were found guilty. But let me know what you think. Do you think Raya and Sakina are fit to be called serial killers? I mean, they didn't directly do the killing. Or should it have been just the men who did the actual killing that should have been tagged serial killers? Or do you think these women are just as guilty as the men? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. David Simelane Thabo, Swaziland. Present day Eswatini. In the early 90s, David Simelane was arrested for robbing and raping a woman. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. After his release in 1998, he vowed to take revenge on society for falsely accusing him of rape. According to Simelane, he did not rape the woman, nor did he rob her, and so he felt he was punished for a crime he did not commit, wasting 6 years of his life as well as the stigma of being a convict. And so, the moment he stepped out of prison, he knew he was going to be Swaziland's worst nightmare. His killing spree may have begun in the early to mid-90s, and his targets were mostly women, including pregnant women. It was said that he would talk to friends to help him find a maid, and when his friends who had no idea what he was up to would find these people, he would willingly pay the transport fare of these women to meet them up and take them to a forest where he would attack them, tie them up, sexually assault them, and strangle or even stab them if they struggled with him. In most cases, he beheaded them and then buried their bodies in shallow graves. Simelane was caught after some herdsmen discovered a mutilated body during a search of a runaway cow. These herdsmen quickly called the police, and instantly the police put an eye on the area. It didn't take long before Simelane was spotted in the area again near one of the graves of his victims. It is usually in the nature of some serial killers to revisit the site of their crime scene. And I think this might have been the case for Simelane, who when arrested did not hold back or deny. He even took the policemen to the graves of the other victims, where 45 bodies were found, including 4 babies, whose remains were discovered in the remains of the women who were believed to have been fully pregnant at the time they were murdered. Upon further investigation, the police did not believe that his motive was merely just the fact that he was accused of a crime he did not commit in the past. I mean, they felt that there could have been more to Simelane's murder because he went through such hell to kill these women and also hide their body. So the police were in total doubt that this man was killing these women because he was having a revenge for a crime he didn't commit in the 80s. They pointed out the fact that Simelane needed to climb hills and mountains just so he could hide some of these bodies. I mean, when the police were following him in the search of the remains of his victims, they had to climb hills, mountains, and it was so stressful to them that they were like, did this man really do all of this? Did this man really go through all this stress just because he was trying to take revenge of a crime he didn't commit in the 90s? They felt that the stress in which Simelane went through just to do all of this did not seem like it measured up with the reason he gave. The police were of the opinion that some people might have been behind it. They were of the opinion that he might have been working for some people. He might have been killing these people and taking their organs because even at the time, Simelane was broke. He didn't have money. He struggled with money. So how come this man who is struggling with money is busy using his money to pay the transportation fare of women coming from faraway cities just so that he could kill them for nothing? Now, the police did not just believe the fact that this guy went through the stress of spending money and going through mountains and valleys just to hide the bodies of these women, all because he was trying to take revenge on the society for accusing him falsely. However, Simelane maintained that he actually did it for that reason, and that there was no other reason he did it but for the fact that he was wrongly accused of rape and robbery in the 90s. After his trial, he was found guilty of killing 28 women and sentenced to death by hanging. Number 2. Abdelaali Hadi, Morocco. Abdelaali Hadi is a Moroccan serial killer whose killing spree began in 2001 and ended in 2004. Although his total victim was just 9, his story might just be one of the weirdest and most complicated, or maybe not really complicated, of all. Abdelaali targeted young children, young teenagers between 13 and 16. Most of these teenagers worked at a road station where he worked, and it is believed that after work he would lure his victims towards a valley, promising them more work or money, only to sexually abuse them after hitting their heads with a blunt object, before finally strangling them to death. It was said that after he strangled them, he would bury them and then come back 3 months later to the gravesite, dig them out and scatter their bones around the valley. This was how he was caught. Some locals were said to have gone up the valley to discover a decomposing body, and instantly they informed the authorities, who upon checking around the site saw many skeletal remains. And after soil testing and DNA samples, they were able to trace the family of 3 of the remains who had admitted that their sons had gone missing, and at the time they went missing, they all worked at the road station. The police began monitoring the road station, hoping to find the killer, hoping that they would see an elderly man with a younger boy walking towards the valley again. They were just waiting that the killer would strike again. At the same time the police were monitoring the road station, the remains were being taken to the lab for testing. And just during one of the testing, they saw a note next to the skull of one of the victims, and the note had a name written on it, Hadi. And so the lab scientist was like, there is a note close to this skull, it's written Hadi, like, could this be a clue? And with that, the police decided that, instead of monitoring this road station, why don't we ask questions? Immediately they began to ask who went by the name of Hadi in the road station. They met a man, and the man basically said, yeah, his name had Hadi in it. And after interrogating the man, they just didn't feel like he might have been the one. And so they asked him if he knew anyone else by the name of Hadi who also worked at the road station. And this man said yes, that he had a brother who also goes by the name of Hadi. And then this man took them to Abdelaali's house. As Abdelaali opened the door to the policeman, he said, "Finally, I have been waiting for you guys since to save me from my torture." And that was how he handed himself to the policeman. Admitted to killing every single one person he was accused of, he was tried and eventually sentenced to death. But this is what makes this particular case so confusing. How did the name get close to the skull of one of the victims? How long had the name been written? And who wrote the name? Was it one of the victims before they died? Or did Abdelaali himself write the name close to one of his victims, hoping that they would be found and he would be caught and arrested? After all, he seemed like he really wanted to be caught. So let me know what you think. Do you think Abdelaali was the one who wrote his name himself? Or do you think this might have been one of the victims using his last breath to give out the clue of who his killer was? Let me know what you think in the comment below. Finally, we are at our #1 spot. So if you're still watching to this point, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification button for more future videos like this. I appreciate you for still watching, and I hope you stay tuned to this channel in the future because there will be many more interesting videos to come. So can you guess which serial killer is taking our #1 spot, or at least the country where the serial killer might have been coming from? I mean, by now you would be able to have an idea which country might be leading with the most dangerous serial killer. #1, Moses Sithole, South Africa. Handsome, intelligent, broken and ruthless. These are some of the words used to describe South Africa's most notorious serial killer, who apparently has earned the #1 spot for the most deadliest and dangerous serial killer in Africa on this list. Moses Sithole was known to have killed at least 76 people, majority of them women. Up to this day, it is believed that many of his victims' bodies were never recovered. He was tagged the South African Strangler, the ABC Killer, the Gauteng Killer, killer. His killing spree spanned across towns and villages in South Africa, and although he had been convicted of raping several women in the 80s, his serial killing may have started in the 90s, when 4 bodies of black women were discovered in almost similar death condition. It was the discovery of these 4 women in 1994 that made the police believe that a serial killer was at large. Moses, who had a tough childhood after losing his father and being abandoned by his mother, was forced to grow up by himself. It was said that he became very sexual at just a young age, and over time consistently forcing himself on women, which he got arrested for. Now, he did claim that he was accused falsely by these women, which played the basis behind his reasons for killing women in the future. The police believed that he wasn't innocent of the rape, that he was guilty, and he only just begun killing the women because he knew killing them would mean these women would not have to report him to the police anymore. Personally, I think this is why a lot of serial rapists turn out to be serial killers, because eventually these rape victims would in turn report to the police. And I think that is why many serial rapists end up killing women. His pattern of killing was not specific. The police noticed that with each body, they found out a different method was used to kill these women. But they knew that the serial killer was only trying to throw them off to make them not think that it was one person doing the killings. Since Moses worked with an organization that handled victims of child abuse, Moses used his position to lure women under the guise of giving them a job. He would interview these women and eventually give them a letter of employment. Then he would take these women to the farmland that they are supposed to work at, just to look at the land where they are, supposed to be working at, they are supposed to be managing or overseeing. So Moses would take these women to the farmlands just to survey the land, and during the survey, he would attack them, rape them, and strangle them with their underwear. It was almost hard to locate him, even after the police discovered that he was the one. After the body of one particular victim was discovered and identified, witness recounted that she had gone to see a man by the name of Moses Sithole for a job interview. The police even saw the job application signed by Moses Sithole that confirmed that she had been employed. But the instant a second victim was linked to Sithole, that was when the police figured out that Moses Sithole was the killer they were looking for. They soon announced a manhunt for him, but somehow that didn't stop Sithole, who kept killing more women despite the fact that he knew that he was being hunted. The problem was, when the police announced a manhunt for the serial killer, they didn't give the details of the name. They just said that they were looking for a serial killer. They didn't give name or picture or anything, but they knew who it was. And I think that might have been the reason why Moses continued killing, because even though he saw in the news that the police have launched a manhunt for a serial killer, it didn't stop him from, committing more crimes. But when the police realized that more women were being killed, they released the details of Moses Sithole to the public. Soon his name, age, description, and picture got out to the public. And this was when Moses decided to run for his life. In an attempt to hide, Moses began to reach out to relations, trying to, see if anyone could house him and hide him, because now he knew he was done for. But how far could he run or hide with his name and picture all over the country? Moses was apprehended and arrested, but he fought with the police refusing arrest, denying that he was not the one they were looking for. In this process, he was shot on his leg and his stomach, and eventually hospitalized. After he had healed from his injuries, he admitted to killing these women in series of interviews. He was found guilty of the murder of just 29 women, the ones whose body were recovered. However, the police believed that his victims could have been as many as 78 women. So guys, this is the end of our countdown. I know it's been a long road. I just tried to give as much detail as I could. But I want to ask, do you agree with this list? Is that who you think should have been #1 spot instead of Moses Sithole? And do you think there's anyone who deserves to be on this list that I did not mention? Let me know in the comment below. And if you have time, see how you can rearrange this list in your own order, from the least dangerous to the most dangerous. I would like to see how you would rearrange this list from number 10 to number 1. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you stay subscribed, and I hope you've also turned on your notification button so that you will be notified whenever there is a new video. Don't forget to like this video and share with your friends. See you next time on my channel.